See, I understand that.
Sorry, please could we mute ourselves, please? Could we mute ourselves, please? Okay, as I was saying earlier, you are welcome once more to the HR mentorship program. This is a program which is a brainchild of Dr. Oluyemi Adeosun, and it's all part of his contribution towards expanding the HR space, expanding knowledge, and expanding all those things, all those tools which make us better HR people within our work spaces. And today's topic is workplace compliance, a people-centric approach. Workplace compliance, a people-centric approach. I'll be leading the bulk of the discussion because Dr. Adeosun is unavoidably absent at the present time. So, and the presentation is by myself, whose voice you are hearing, Gillian Nduoma, MCIPM, HRPL, MNITAD. And by the grace of God, I'm the Country People Support Manager for Pricewise Stores Nigeria Limited. So my profile, I mean, normally it's funny because you normally get your profile read by you, but like I said, one of the key characteristics of, I guess, HR professionals is we're resourceful and we're creative, and that's what is playing out today. And like I said, Gillian Chidin-Duoma, MCIPM, HRPL, MITD, is currently the Country People Support Manager of Pricewise Stores, previously trading as Pep Stores Nigeria Proprietary. The PTY is a short for Proprietary Limited. Gillian is an HR generalist with over 2 decades of human resources and business management experience, which has cut across various industries, viz. Aviation, certification, advertising, branding, as well as currently the retail trade. During her time in Pep Stores, she was a recipient, amongst many others, of the Pieter Erasmus, which is a Pep Group MD Award for going above and beyond in her service to the organization. She's an alumnus of the University of Lagos, as well as the Lagos State University, where she obtained her first degree and master's degree respectively. Gillian has attended various trainings over the years and also facilitated training in the spheres of human resources and general management. She's passionate about organizational culture, ethics and compliance, as well as learning and development. In addition to other posts held on other professional and community platforms, she's presently the General Secretary of the Ikeja chapter of the Lagos State branch of CIPM, and has served in various committees at national level, and is presently on the HR and Governance Committee at the national level. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present myself to you. My name is Gillian once more. So, what is compliance? We said that our topic is HR is a compliance in the workplace, a people-centric approach. So what is compliance? I'm not going to waste too much time with definitions because some of them already speak to themselves. And it simply refers to adhering to laws, regulations, organizational policies, and every instruction that comes out in the workplace. That's simply what compliance means. And please, if you feel I'm moving too fast, feel free to unmute yourself and slow me down. But I'm just trying to do as much as possible today because we still have a few more slides to get to. And please, because I'm sharing, I actually cannot see see everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing for now, and I'm going to make anyone in the meeting today a co-host so that they can assist me. Thank you. So just give me 1 minute. Let me stop sharing and I'll do that. Okay, then. So I have made uh, Saiwa and Toyin co-host for the session. So please, I'll share my slides once more. Permit me 1 minute, please. So can we see my slides? Could we unmute and let me know
Yes,
if you can see my slides?
Yes, ma'am, we can
Okay.
see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, people centricity, like we said, making people the center of compliance. And what do we mean by people centricity? Simple, when people are the focus of the action, when decisions are taken based on a people approach or perspective. A people centric approach to compliance focuses on engaging employees and fostering a culture of shared responsibility rather than solely relying on rules and regulations to drive compliance. You know, often we hear in the Nigerian space, they were not carried along. We need to carry people along. You know, that is a Nigerian way of speaking. We talk of carrying people along, and that could just be another balance for people centricity, carrying our staff along when we're doing things, when we're trying to get things done. As HR people, often the buck stops on our table when it comes to getting people to comply, getting our staff to comply. And what's one of the easiest ways for us to make them comply is by carrying them along, by getting their feedback. You know, as I talk, you might notice I might end up, moving into areas which we haven't spoken about originally. Let me just, yes, to make it bigger. I might find myself like in the course of the conversation, it will look like I'm jumping back and forth, but we will try to capture as much as we can. So, like I said, carrying people along, making sure, I mean, when we're coming up with policies, when we're coming up with regulations, as often as possible, it's good to involve the line managers, involve supervisors, maybe there are team leaders within your system, because at the end of the day, a lot of times HR is not the sole driver of activities within the workplace. HR needs to work with team leaders. Everybody's work structure is different. So you know what your work structure looks like. You know the hierarchy that exists within where you work. So at the end of the day, when you're coming up with all these policies, when you're coming up with all these regulations, when you're asked to drive something in your business, it's important that you identify the people, the staff members who are going to help you succeed. These are the people you have to meet up with, relate with, sound them out, carry them along, find out what do they think. Of course, while you're doing all these things, don't forget that there are I mean, our labor laws exist, best practices exist, all these things exist. And it's also letting them know that some of the things we're trying to do here, hey, it's not about the business just wanting to impose. It's not just about HR wanting to flex. It's about the fact that there are laws in place, there are best practices in place, and all these things we need to factor in whenever we are coming up with our rules and regulations. So that is the people centricity we're talking about. In fact, the word just popped up, and I really like the word carrying people along, carrying everybody that matters, because HR will not be everywhere. HR will not do everything, but HR is somewhere in the mix of all the activities going on in the workplace. And that is why, because you can't be able, I mean, if for those of us who work in the private sector, you will notice that in most private sector driven businesses, the support staff are normally not too many. That's one thing I'm sure a lot of you will agree with me. I mean, I always like to crack the joke about the private sector versus the civil service. A former senior colleague of mine used to joke that in the public sector you would have more support staff than technical, but you find out in the private sector you have fewer support staff vis-a-vis the technical. So you cannot do it alone. You need to work with all these people. Hence the carrying along and the people centricity. So I want to believe that with that, I've laid a bit of a foundation for what we're talking about. So I came up with this diagram. If you look at this diagram, it's called a Venn diagram. For those of us who still remember our mathematics, it's called a Venn diagram. And every Venn diagram has a center point, a central point. And that's why if you see the picture, you'll see people at the center. We have policies, you have codes, you have rules, regulations, you've got procedures, you're dishing out memos, discipline is taking place. But at the end of the day, all of them intersect at the point where the people meet, because nothing can get done without people. We've all heard the popular saying that our people are the heart of our business. And you can see that from the Venn diagram. People are the heart of the business. So, how do we go about this? How do we go about our people centricity? How do we go about ensuring compliance in the workplace while also carrying our staff along? That's the question we're trying to focus on today. And first and foremost, before we jump in, there is a need for a mindset change. When we're coming up with our compliance, our policies, our regulations, we need to have this mindset change, more of a carrot and less of a stick approach. We commonly hear us talking about the carrot and stick approach, the carrot and stick approach. But then we are saying here that there should be more of the carrot and less of the stick if you really want to get people to comply, if you really want to get people to follow you. I'm sure many of us at one time or another in our lives, we heard the story about the man of nuances to it. But the crux of the story is that the animal kingdom programs on TV, they say the, the kick, the kick of a donkey, it can kill. So we don't want to be in that position. So you can just imagine, I'm not calling our staff donkeys, but you can imagine sometimes when there's a lot of high-handedness in the workplace. Please, you'll forgive me the noise you're hearing in the background. I live not too far from a mosque, so I think it's the call to prayer. But as long as you can hear me, we'll continue. So, what we're talking about, the donkey, the carrot, and the stick approach, you find out in organizations where there's a lot of high handedness, you tend to get a lot of rebellion. Some of the rebellion might be overt, some might be covert, but it is as a result of a high handed approach. Too much stick in the mix when we're talking of compliance. And we also need to remember that we're all in it together. HR is in it together with everyone. It's not about creating these regulations, policies, and everything. We have to let everybody know that we are all in this together. If does acknowledge the fact that there is a need for compliance whole, and the workspace is just a microcosm of the larger society. And then every employee matters. I mean, this is a phrase which I've borrowed out of where I presently work. Every employee matters. We are all important, from the highest to the least. We're all important in ensuring the compliance takes place. Compliance is not the sole preserved department, any particular hierarchy. I continue. So the first is, how do we go about compliance in the workspace? A people-centric approach. The first one we have here is via our culture initiatives. I know that most of us here work in organizations where there's a buzz around culture, around values. What is culture? The way we do things. That's a popular definition for culture. So, as an HR person, you can create compliance via your culture initiatives, via your value initiatives. And any other activities that are created values. Take, for instance, I know the acronym for the values of scripts. I mean, I'll be lying if I say I can remember. I know we have service,
Good evening, everyone. We apologize for the glitch in the network connection. So I suppose the host is trying to connect back. So please, let's just hold on for a few minutes. I'll also try to reach her so that she can join the call back. Thank you.
So I don't know why that message keeps popping up. I don't know. Could any of my hosts help me with that? Thank you. So, where was I? We're talking about internal communications. So I want us to think back. Yes. What are the words do we use? You are compelled. What's the kind of words you use? So please. Okay, I'm back. I think that is better. Actually came to the room I judged to be the most quiet room in the house. So, as I was talking about communications, please could we mute ourselves if we're not speaking? I was talking about, yes, please. Please, host, could you help me mute those who are speaking? Thank you very much. So we're talking about communication. How do we communicate? What words do we use? What phrases do we use when we're communicating? Do these words convey a sense of, remember what I said, we're in it together. It's all about us. We all matter. Do the words we use, do the phrases we use convey that impression? I mean, I've worked in a place where, I mean, those days I wasn't in HR. And I must admit that I think my days outside HR also shaped my own attitude and the kind of HR I would like to practice and how I would like to be seen as. So I remember then, whenever memos come, everybody sees the memo. You know, those were not the days of general emails. Those were the days of they put the memo on the notice board. You know, the notice board is normally around the photocopy machine or where you drink or the fridge or something, and everybody is standing and they're like, waiting, then they talk safe. These people they have come and so they go just they give person instruction like say person are picking, and you can already gauge the reception to that communication. You can already gauge that there is a kind of resistance, maybe passive, maybe overt, but some people express it, some are just like, let us see. Then it sometimes it even became a joke. If you don't mind yourself, I go just cut memo for you. It will just cut you memo. You are hereby directed. It becomes a kind of joke, and we don't want our efforts at compliance to be looked at as a joke in the business. We don't want our efforts at creating a compliant workplace to be looked at as an unserious business. So our internal communications, the way we communicate, the words we use, the verbs, can also help us to get a compliant workforce. Now, via training and awareness. Of course, talked about fostering a culture of continuous training to sensitize employees on compliance policies and procedures. When using in-house trainers, ensure the trainer is familiar with your company ethos and weaves it into the training. No, I put this because it reminded me of a time when an organization I worked for back then, they had a policy of most of the trainings were curated from within. Let me put it that way. Most of the trainings, most of the training, the methodologies, everything were curated from within. So a time came when we needed to get an external person in for one reason or another. Do you know that this person sat with us for like a week? What were we doing with that person? We were kind of giving the person a quick immersion into the nature of our business. What are our cultures? What are our values? What type of organization are we? So that this person, when doing the training, would weave our values, would weave our culture, would weave our credo, all those things into the training. And at the end of the day, you find out that most organizations, when you're curating training, especially when you are curating it from within, it's always good to, you know, put sensitize employees. Like I talked about values, I talked about culture, I talked about the language being used when curating those trainings. Try to weave compliance within the training sphere. Using there's a popular thing going on right now. We're talking about storytelling as a way of training. There are some people, in fact, I read somebody's profile somewhere, and the person is defined as a storyteller. So what do we do? You tell stories even during the training, and you tell stories in a way that you're weaving compliance, the benefits of compliance, why we should comply within the business. Opportunities for such should always be sought when we're doing our trainings and our awareness. Then via employee engagement, I've said, I don't know if you're picking up on the pictures I have in the corner of the presentations. You can see two rings there. And what greater engagement than the engagement of marriage? And how we as an organization, we are, should I say, we are married to each other in the workplace. As HR, we are married. But can everyone see the screen even as it is now?
Yes.
So we were talking via employee engagement. So as I was saying, you can see two rings there. And what greater form of engagement I was saying before than marriage? And we can equally say that the relationship we have with each other could be a marriage relationship. I mean, it's symbiotic. We breathe off each other. We gain strength from each other. Everybody matters. Everybody's actions or inactions all speak to the rise or the fall of the organization. And so when we talk about employee engagement, what do we understand by employee engagement? Employee engagement, the way I like to describe it is, as an employee, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning to go to work? When the organization says, oh, how do you feel when the organization talks of engaging in activities? Are you one of those people who looks forward to those activities? Do you look forward to, when discussions come up, when the organization says, oh, we're having a road show, oh, we're doing this, everybody come to work tomorrow wearing red? Are you that employee that will decide, I can't send Jerry if I don't have red, I'm wearing white? What kind of employee are you? That's what we talk about when we talk of employee engagement, the willingness to participate, the willingness to be part of what your organization is doing. And like we said, we're still talking about compliance in the workplace, a people-centric approach. So as HR people, how do we go about that? You encourage via feedback. You also encourage via take ownership. Remember at the beginning, we talked of carrying people along. That was a big operative word we started with. As HR, you make sure you carry everyone along. You carry your line managers, your supervisors, your team leaders, everybody who has a part to play, everyone who can help you create engagement within the business, everyone who can help you get compliance to your, I mean, with your initiatives. Those are the kind of people you encourage them. You give them feedback when they seek it, and you also try to ensure that everybody feels as if now we get this thing. I mean, forgive my local colloquialism. Now we get them. It is our thing. It is something we see it a lot, even in the public space. When they're trying to ginger you, when they're trying to get by, oh, he's our brother, he's our member, he's our this, he's part of us. Do we want him to fail? No, we don't. So that is one of the things that HR needs to do. Encourage employee participation and feedback on when you do things, when you come up with all your policies and your regulations. Seek feedback. You might select people. In all organizations, we have people we call our people champions, people you have identified within the organization as people who you can sound out, you can get some feedback from. Sometimes those informal ways of getting feedback, often they even help faster than you send out a Google form. Of course, when you send a Google form, you always ask for the email, maybe the person's name, everything. Of course, how many people now want to give feedback? But that informal way of going about it also helps. And then, like I said, weaving it into your town hall or staff meetings. I'm sure, I mean, let me not make assumptions, but I want to believe that a lot of organizations, from time to time, you hold town hall meetings or staff meetings where everybody gathers, everybody is free to speak and express themselves. So it's at times like that, you tell stories that speak to compliance. You tell stories that speak to doing the right thing, how it benefits the business, because a lot of things go on in the workspace. So I'm sure we will not be short of stories to tell when we're trying to weave it into our town hall meetings and our staff meetings. Another way is via our reward structure. Our reward structure. We need to find a way of creating a reward structure that speaks to doing the right thing. We need to create a reward structure that speaks to doing the right thing. Most of the time, no qualitative rewards. Remember what we always say, or what is always said: what you reward gets done. What you reward gets done. So it's important that if you want to show compliance has been an important part of the business, has been the right thing to do, you can create rewards around doing the right thing. You go to some organizations and they've got these posters, maybe an employee of the, maybe they're rewarding an employee for customer service, they're rewarding an employee for going above and beyond. What are they trying to do? They're trying to reward the right thing. And when you reward the right thing, people will fall in line. Although everybody, no matter what anybody says, everybody likes to see their picture on a wall somewhere. Some people, maybe they put it in the kitchen. When I say kitchen, don't get me wrong, maybe canteen, where everybody goes to, where everybody gathers. Sometimes your picture is pasted. In some organizations, you have what they call the watering holes, where everybody gathers at the photocopy machine, at the canteen, and maybe where you have your dispenser. You put up the person. Everybody likes to see their picture. And what are you doing? You're rewarding. You're creating a reward system around doing the right thing, around complying. And I said qualitative rewards also matter. You find that, but in most organizations, the focus is on reward people for maybe bringing more customers. You're rewarding people for more sales. You're rewarding people for, your employees are being, and then sometimes we ask ourselves, so what happens to employees in the support structure, finance, HR, maybe marketing? Well, did I say marketing? There are some departments which you cannot call front facing, customer facing. How do you reward them also? How do you ensure they also buy into compliance? Qualitative rewards also matter. So I hope I'm doing well for time. Dr. Yemi, I hope I'm doing well for time. So, via leadership. walking the talk, mirroring what is expected of others. You know, in every business, it's true, but a lot of times, when it comes to culture, when it comes to values, when it comes to compliance, these things seem to be warehoused in HR most of the time. They seem to be warehoused in HR all the time. But one thing I always try to do is push back, and I push back to leadership. Because if leadership does not walk the talk, it makes it difficult for HR to get compliance from the employees. Leadership needs to be seen to be complying. Maybe we're doing something around, maybe let's assume there's a get together or something, and you say, okay, everybody, if a company has a particular t-shirt or a uniform which needs to be worn for this event, everybody needs to be there at 8 o'clock. We have rules and regulations around things. It's expected that leadership should also turn up wearing the designated outfits, coming at the appointed time, and generally showing leadership. Showing, because you find out that the easiest way to fall HR's hands in a business is when leadership does not comply. Why? Because HR actually is like the representative of leadership vis-a-vis the employees. So if your leadership is not even doing those things you are trying to get others to comply with, what message is being sent out there? And we talk about mirroring what is expected of others. You expect your staff to take, for instance, you expect your staff to come early. You come early too. You expect the staff not to eat, to only eat in designated areas. You do the same thing too. No, you don't expect staff to do X, Y, Z, and PYC. Then you shouldn't also be seen to be doing those things. I know it's not easy. We're in a culture where the leader is kind of considered above board. But there's nothing as good as when a leader is walking the talk. It becomes easier for everyone else to comply. Like we always say, what's your excuse? If a guy is doing it, what is your own excuse? If a guy can comply, we say we should all come down for maybe the fire drill. If a guy is downstairs during a fire drill, then what is your excuse for not being there? So it's very important for leadership to also be involved, for leadership to help in this whole carrying along and people centricity approach to workplace. Because when you come to think of it also, even the leader is one of the employees. The GM is an employee too. The maybe financial controller, everybody is an employee of the business when all is said and done. And it's expected that they give support. So as an HR person, it's imperative and it's important that you sensitize even leadership around compliance, around falling in, and around showing good example. So I move on. So we now come to people-centric compliance tools. These are some tools which we can use to ensure people centricity. In the process of coming this far, I've already mentioned some of them in the course of the conversation. I mean, we're looking at compliance ambassador programs. 3, compliance champion networks. In organizations, take for instance now, for those of you who are members of CIPM, we have a cooperative, and they created something we call ambassadors. What's the role of the ambassador? It's to market the cooperative. It's to carry people along. It's to help the cooperative executive, respond to questions, respond to the needs and the desires of the members. That's what they are there for. So it's the same thing even within the workplace. Sometimes we have those ambassadors. They might not be official. I like to take an example from a time in our business. We were going through, let me say, we were going through a kind of a turbulent time in the business. And one of the things that helped us come through that turbulent time were the ambassadors within the business, our employees, ambassadors within the business who caught on to what was going on, and they were like the mouthpiece of leadership during that turbulent time, helping us. In fact, we didn't even know. But what happened? These are people who were also engaged. Remember, I talked about engagement. These are people who were engaged. And by reason of their engagements, they became ambassadors, they became champions for the business. We also talked about digital communication platforms. Remember, we had talked about training. We had talked about training awareness. You know, a lot of organizations now are making a lot of use of the LMS platforms. There's so much to be got on YouTube. There are so many platforms for which you can bring up, trainings. You can bring up communications. There are so many snippets. You have the TED talks. I find out that even our Dr. Yemi also has a YouTube channel where you can visit. All these things help to speak. There are platforms which an organization can use to carry its people along. I think I'm going to continue using that word, carrying its people along. And then we've already talked about employee feedback. We've talked about survey tools. We've talked about interactive training, gamification and interactive training. Those trainings which everybody gets involved in. It's not always training behind maybe a system or a laptop. Those trainings where everybody is gathered together, even the leadership is also part of that training. You're carrying out trainings which speak to the business, trainings which speak to compliance. All these things are tools which you can use. I know that when we talk about these things, and I always say that no business is the same. Every business has its own peculiarities. So even as we say all these things, sometimes when you attend some of these programs, these talks and trainings, you get that feeling that all this is up talk. But at the end of the day, it's all about the learnings and curating the ones which are workable and using them within our own businesses. We might not be able to use all of them, but we can use some of them in line with what obtains within our business. So we looked at the compliance ambassadors program, creating ambassadors within the organization. People these are people, sometimes you carve them out, you seek them out, you find out how, if they are like-minded. And these are people you give snippets. At the end of the day, everybody likes to feel special. We're not creating an us and them. It's not about creating an us and them system, but it's about identifying people also who can help you as HR drive compliance within the system. You will always get those people who they understand, they get it. Even if they don't get it immediately, they're willing to get it. They're willing to be open-minded. They're willing to relearn, and they're willing to be your champions. Sorry. And what are the benefits? What are the benefits of all what we've been talking about? The main benefits is an enhanced employee experience. Everybody likes to work in a place where they feel important, where they feel that they matter. All of us do. Everybody likes to feel that their voice is heard. And that is why we talked about, carrying along, ensuring that people are, there's compliance, true. They understand there's compliance, there are regulations. Remember our Venn diagram when we started? There are rules, regulations, procedures. Yes, they're all there. They all exist. But people begin to understand why they are necessary and how it plays. Nobody wants to work in a confused environment. Nobody wants to work in a lawless environment. Even as Nigerians, none of us, I don't think any of us enjoys lawlessness, either in our homes, in our communities, even in the country. Nobody enjoys it. So this kind of thing enhances the employee experience. And of course, it improves compliance rates. When you have an organization where you're not wielding the big stick. Remember what I said about the carrot and the stick approach at the beginning of our discussion. In compliance, rates are improved. Everybody just wants to do the right thing. I'm not saying you will not get those who fall out, those who, as human being, there's always room for non-compliance. There will be people who do the wrong thing. There will be people who go against company policy. But you will find out that they are fewer and far between. That's what you find out that happens. And of course, when it's fewer and far between, it even helps even you as HR. I don't think anybody enjoys every time you're in disciplinary meetings, every time there are disciplinary hearings going on. They take time, they just take so much time, so much paperwork when you could have been doing so many other things. So when you have improved compliance rates, of course it cuts out the need for a lot of time. And everybody, I mean, I know that, speaking for myself, let me not say I know, one area of HR which always, I mean, doesn't doesn't sit well is the disciplinary process. It's not a place where we like to be. If we have to be there, we will be there. But I don't think it's a place that most of us would like to be. Then, of course, reduced risk and liability. When people are complying, there's reduced risk. Even from an external perspective, there is reduced risk. Because a lot of times when we talk about compliance in the workplace, it also has to do with compliance vis-a-vis external bodies, vis-a-vis external authorities. And when everybody is complying, everybody sees the needs to comply. We understand how compliance helps us as a business. It reduces our risks and liabilities. And talking of increased productivity, remember what I just said now about disciplinary hearings. I mean, I don't know how every organization runs this, but in some organizations, it can be a drawn out thing. 1 day, 2 days, that's all you're doing before you talk of the recordings, the minute takings. In my organization, there's an option of appeal. And of course, when the person appeals, it's like you're opening up the hearing again. That's another 1 day or 2 days. And of course, you want to be doing other things. You want to be getting other more things, more beneficial things to the business done. Better decision making. Of course, when there is compliance, decision making is better. Everybody is complying. Everybody knows what should be done. When decisions are being taken, because everybody is aware of the benefits of compliance, everybody is aware of what the fallout of non-compliance will be. It will inform decision making. Decision making will be taken with compliance at the somewhere in our subconscious. And then, of course, the organization has a stronger reputation. For this point six, I'm looking at it more from the external perspective. And then, even within the business, all of us, I want to believe that everybody derives pride and joy from feeling that my organization has a reputation for compliance. My organization has a reputation either internally or externally. People know that that organization is a compliance one. That organization, they always try to do the right thing. They build their policies and procedures around the right thing. And then, of course, that gives you a competitive advantage vis-a-vis, especially when I talk of competitive advantage from this perspective, I'm looking at it even from the perspective of maybe you're bidding for government contracts, you're looking for maybe external investors, you're looking for external contractors to come work in the business. There's some places where you go seek for contracts. They normally have this form that you fill. And in that form, they ask questions. And some of their questions sometimes focus on your compliance within your business. Within the business, outside the business, they focus on these things. So when you have a compliant organization, and of course, don't forget, we're talking of people centricity. Who makes the organization compliant at the end of the day? It's the people within the organization. That's why every employee matters. I said that at the beginning. Every employee matters. Even a cleaner, a driver can get an organization in trouble if they are not compliant, if they are not doing the right thing. So let's not feel that, oh, it's only at a certain level, it's at every level. But compliance needs to be taken seriously. Now, some challenges. Challenges. The ever shifting regulatory landscape. I mean, we're all in Nigeria. and we know that often, and we know that policy policy somersaults happen quite often. So even as an HR person, you need to be aware of the regulatory landscapes and how you need to build them into your business and into how you comply. Take, for instance, I know right now there's a new tax law which takes effect in January. So everybody needs to be aware, HR needs to be aware, finance needs to be aware to make sure that you align with the new tax laws which are coming up in January 2025. I remember recently, I think even with the ITF, the scope of ITF was expanded. The number of staff you need to have to fall into the ITF debt was lowered. So, these type of things, you always need to be aware of such things, even as an HR person, so that you build it into your compliance. And you might say, how does this speak to my people? Even your staff are aware of all these regulatory shifts. And nobody wants to be seen to be working in an organization that does not abide by laws. I believe that every organization, every employee, if I know some employees who will beat their chest and say, the organization I work for, anything government says, they obey. Some people, well, are not too happy with it, but for the benefit of the business and ultimately the people, these are things that need to be done. So as an HR person, you need to always be aware of what's going on in the regulatory space. What is happening now? What do I need to do? I don't want my organization to be non-compliant. And we all know what happens when you are non-compliant. Before you know it, government is at your doorstep. The regulatory authority specific to that non-compliance is at your doorstep. And of course, we all know what happens then. Then you're going back and forth with them. Your productivity is diminished, and apart from that, even your organization now has a bad rep. That's the word. You have a bad rep vis-a-vis the regulatory authorities. Another challenge is ensuring employee buy-in. We've talked about carrying people along, but of course, you will always get those employees who, well, how does it no at the end of the day, it's always, how does this benefit me? Most of the time, with most of us, how does this benefit, how does this speak to me as an employee? It's always a big challenge ensuring employee buy-in. That's why we refer to having ambassadors. That's why we talked about having your champions within the business, because truth be told, you might not be able to carry everyone along, but the important thing is that the majority buy into it. The majority can see where you're going with these regulations, with these compliance issues. They can see where you're going. So it's always a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. The important thing is ensuring that you are doing the right thing. You know that what you're doing is the right thing, and the majority understand it, they buy into it, and they run with it. And then we talked about compliance fatigue. Managing compliance fatigue. What is compliance fatigue? Sometimes you have situations where people are just tired. They're every time, don't do this, don't do this, do that, don't do that. So that's why, as HR, also, we also need to be careful with the way we drop new policies, new procedures, new regulations. That's why it's very important when you're building your policy documents, especially, you build them in such a way that you're not tweaking them every 1 year, every 2 years. That's why you find out when you see most organizations' policy documents, it's kind of broad based. It's crafted in a way that it can take you maybe into 2 years, 3 years, unless by virtue of a government directive, there is now a need to revisit it and to rework it. So that's another thing we also need to be careful about. It's not every little time you're coming up with a new process. When I say process, I'm not talking about, of course, a work process. When work processes change depending on the industry you are in, but we're talking about our policy documents. Let's create policy documents which let me use the word, stand the test of time. You find that a lot of organizations, their policy documentation maybe are revised every 3, 4 to 5 years as a means of keeping themselves abreast and ensuring that, things don't begin to drop through the compliance nets. And of course, we talk of balancing compliance with business goals. What are the goals of the business? At the end of the day, this compliance we're talking about, how do they speak to business goals? I mean, let's take for example, one of your there's compliance around things like, should I say, honesty, integrity, and then your business. How does this work into your business goals, the business productivity and profitability? I mean, I remember there was a time where in the banking era, way back then, I believe that there's a lot of, would I say, sanitation has gone on in the banking space, balancing compliance with business goals. You need to bring in customers, you need to do this, you need to do that, but at the same time you cannot be seen to be doctoring the books, you cannot be seen to be doing things which are unethical. So how do you balance such things? Balancing ethical work practices along with ensuring the business goals are met. That is another challenge that we face in the area of compliance. And then we talk about addressing diversity and inclusion gaps. Remember, number two, ensuring employee buy-in. Remember, we talked about carrying people along. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, a new letter has been added to it, belonging. These are some of the buzzwords moving around in the HR space, in the business space right now. Ensuring that you craft your compliance policies, your regulations in such a way that people are not, or they don't feel disenfranchised, they don't feel unheard. When I was putting this down, one of the things that occurred to me was, Nigeria, we're a religious nation. And there was a time when, the public holiday thing, you have public holidays for Christians, you have for Muslims, and then somewhere along the line, the traditional worshippers were wondering, oh, what about us? Is there nothing for us? And then some people were wondering, why should Saturday, why should Saturday be a work day? Because you'll notice that gradually in this country, I don't know if you're a millennial, a Gen X, but you notice that gradually in this country, Saturday work is becoming a norm. There was a time when nobody worked Saturdays, but over the years, gradually, Saturday work is becoming a norm. I know in some industries, like the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry, there are some industries where everybody knew that they work weekends, but they get off days and everything. But the other standard organizations, people didn't work Saturdays, but more and more. And then at a point, we had a religious body that was wondering why Saturday should be a work day. So, addressing diversity and inclusion gaps when you're coming up with your compliance policies. And I think this goes back to employee buying. It goes back to getting champions. It's going back to carrying people along. Let people have a voice. Don't just drop it on people. Don't just drop it there. Yeah, this is it. Take it. It is what it is. No. There should have been town hall meetings. There should have been staff interactions, maybe surveys, to make sure that even while you know that these things need to be done, but at least allow people to have a voice and to express how they feel about it. So I've come to the end of today's presentation. And my last words, slow cook. Slow cook. I mean, this expression, I heard it. Well, there are some things you've been hearing them, but it really came to me at the last ice. I think it was when I can't remember when during one of the panel discussions, the lady that was from Total Energy, she talked about slow cook, and even also the HOS, also talked about slow cook. You find that a lot of times when it comes to HR, when it comes to compliance, when it comes to policies, they don't always happen as quickly as we want them to happen. They don't always happen. People, I know a lot of times people talk about the Indomie generation, but of course, Indomie is 2 minute noodles, 5 minute noodles. Everybody wants things to happen quick, 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 quick. But unfortunately, when it comes, like I say, fortunately, unfortunately, when it comes to people related issues, everything can be quick, quick. Some things are slow cook. You need to allow your staff to imbibe. You need to allow them to come to an understanding. You need to allow them to, to take in these compliance issues, taking these regulations, have a buy-in. And as time goes on, you find out that, I mean, one of the examples, one of the stories that comes to my mind, and maybe I should become a storyteller today. When I joined my organization, we had this induction, and it was a really nice video and everything. But later on, I was opportune to meet one of the staff who was part of that massive culture shift and massive culture change in the business. And when he began telling us the story behind the story, I mean, this slow cook came to my mind. Everybody didn't buy in immediately. Everything didn't happen just like that. It was a gradual process. And of course, as the process went on, some people dropped off, some people came on board, but today the business is enjoying the benefits of those changes which it's brought to bear upon the business, and the business is also better for it. So like I said, nothing happens overnight when it comes to people. It's always slow cook. So I've come to the end of today's presentation. Don't know if I can stop sharing. If we have any questions, maybe comments, observations, anybody wants to add something, tell us a story that speaks to what they have heard today, feel free to. So I'm going to stop sharing. So Dr. Yemi, I hope that is fine.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much, madam. Excellent presentation. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Any questions, any comments, any contributions? Please raise your hands so that we can enable you speak.
Yes, I have a question. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Please go
evening.
ahead.
Okay, my name is Olomo Adewale Joseph. First and foremost, I want to thank the organizers for this kind of forum. I want to appreciate Madam Gillian Unyoma, if I get the name correctly,
Ndoma,
for this
yes.
presentation. It's a nice one. From what I deduce from everything we've been talking about since over some time now, is that whatever we are doing in any organization, we should carry people along, most especially our
Yes.
employees. What about if you are working in an organization whereby the management themselves, their vision is not like that? I remember I was working for I don't know, maybe I should mention name, but maybe if I want to.
Maybe you might not need to mention names.
Okay, so I once worked for an organization before I left. I left the organization because there was no standard at all, no policy, nothing. I as an HR person, I tried to build a kind of a culture, policy culture for them, whereby all the employees were able to know, okay, this is how we do things. When you go against this rule, this is the punishment for it and all that. But they don't want that. The management themselves, they don't want that. Their own is hire and fire, hire and fire. They don't even want to give any employee a second chance and the rest. So my question there is, how do you, when you are an HR, when you find yourself in such situation or in such organization, how do you handle such so that it will not affect you? Because it really affected me. It cost me my job. They were like, if you cannot comply with how we run things there, you should leave. Anything we tell you is what you should do, irrespective of if it's against even the labor labor law is against it, but that is what they want. So how do you handle such as a human resources manager? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Oloma Adewale Joseph. This question is a tricky question because, and it's as you were speaking, I remember the CIPM code of conduct and the last sentence which said that, which talks about resigning if the workspace or the environment is not allowing you conduct practice your HR the way it should be practiced. It's difficult. I mean, from what you have said, it's obviously a one-man business or a two-man business, and it's a challenge. The only thing I can say when one finds oneself in such organizations is to do your best as a professional. I mean, you don't own the business. The only thing you can do is show them that you are a professional. Like just like you said you did. You try to come up with policies, with documentation to structure the place and streamline the place, and at the end of the day they weren't ready. So since they weren't ready, I guess rather than stay there and be considered a quack HR, the time came to leave. So there's really no hard and fast response to that kind of question. The owner of the business is the owner of the business. I remember Dr. Yemi stating as much in the last HR mentorship that he handled when we were talking about leave policies and everything. The owner of the business is the owner of the business. And if after all else fails, I mean, but what does one do but move on? I recall, let me tell you a story. One of the organizations I worked for actually was employed because there was crisis in the organization, and they got in a consultant, and the consultant told them that they needed a structured HR in this place, but they couldn't continue running the business that way. So I came in. Well, maybe one of the things that helped me was the fact that the consultant had recommended, the consultant had told them what needed to be done. So I was coming in on the back of the fact that these are things they need to do. But it wasn't easy. I mean, getting them to comply. I mean, this is leadership now. Getting leadership to comply with some of the suggestions, with some of the things. But slow cook. I said slow cook. By the time I left there, I actually had to leave because I had to leave for my sanity. Let me put it that way. So slow cook. But by the time I left, we had been able to create a structure. But speaking to what you said, the owner of the business is the owner of the business. As a professional, you do the best you can, make your suggestions, document them so that for future purposes, and just hope for the best. I don't know if I've answered that. It's so difficult when you're in those kind of work environments.
I think you answered the question, though. Some of my colleagues that we practice HR together, some of them were like, you should have complied, you should have, because it got to a point after like a year and a half when I couldn't get another job, when I was going through some challenges. So see, a lot of things were coming into my mind, and somebody was saying that, oh boy, if you don't just comply, do it in the once, just to keep your job and take care of your family, but if I had accepted that, my conscience wouldn't have let me be. But having a forum like this, that's why let me hacks, because I don't know. Another person might be going through the same stuff, and we don't know in the future we might still be in the same situation. But thank you for what you just said. Thank you so much.
Yeah, all of my yes, I agree with you. I mean, one of the businesses I left then at a point, I mean, just this is a story. I mean, I tell stories a lot. There was a day I was with my mother and we were having a conversation, and the way I reacted, she looked at me and said, why are you reacting this way? This is not you. When did you become like this? And I paused, and I knew that this behavior had arisen from the place where I worked. It was a fairly toxic organization. And at that point, I told myself, I can't do this anymore. Well, I couldn't resign. I mean, I couldn't just up and resign. I mean, I needed a job. But I intensified my job search. I became more intentional about changing jobs. And I thank God it happens. But I understand what you mean. It's not easy. People say, "Oh, stay, stay, stay." I mean, I've been there. I've been there before, so I understand what you're talking about. It was difficult for me. The whole, just feeling as if, what is going on here. It's true. I was introducing things were happening, but but even then, getting compliance. That's why I said leader is very important for leadership to buy in. If leadership doesn't buy in, it actually makes in quotes, a mess of everything you're trying to do.
So we have a question in the group chat from Olawale Nelson.
Okay.
So he asked how do we change the mindset of group of employees that believe in status quo should remain the same?
Okay, how do we change the mindset of employees who believe the status quo should remain the same? Most of the time, status quo, it means that they are comfortable with the way things are being done. When you see people that want the status quo to remain, most of the time they are beneficiaries of that status quo. But you as the HR, and I still say that, HR, please, as HR people, we're not don't we're not superhumans. We too are, should I say, our powers, we derive our authority from somewhere, and we derive it from leadership. Now, if I don't know if it's leadership that wants the status quo to remain, now that's a different conversation. But if it's just employees, I mean, then you need to sit down and do a lot of work. What is that status quo? Is this status quo benefiting the business as a structure as it is right now? I'm an apostle of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So what is this status quo? Look at it. Can we do it better? Sometimes you introduce things, what they call, you introduce them piecemeal. Today you introduce one thing, tomorrow you introduce it. Everything doesn't have to be, human beings, we say the only constant is change. But even when change comes, we resist it. Especially when the change rushes at us, we tend to be resistant. So the thing is to look at that status quo. What are those things? If I change this, I change it. Which of these things, if I change now, will have an immediate positive, that's the word, positive impact on the business? So you can start from there. So you need, like I said, the organization you work with, what the status quo is, the things which can be done to make things better. If those status quo are not I work for an organization where one of their bylines then was for the benefit of the business and its people. So whatever is going on, there needs to be a convergence of benefits, both for the business and for the people. So I think that's where I'll stop. So, and of course, like I said, carrying people along and doing it small, piecemeal. Don't try to overturn everything at once. You will meet resistance. Look for the quick wins in the things you can change and begin to introduce those ones. While at the same time, singling out people you can identify as your champions in this change that you want to bring about. So, thank you. So, any other questions? Okay, somebody's Uncle K says it's difficult to liberate a man who has found comfort in captivity. It's very, very true. Okay, Oluwatoyin Adekunte Akako, yes, she's agreeing with me. Hospitality and tourism. In fact, for those two industries, in fact, what you call it, their own work starts when everybody's meant to be relaxing. So everybody knows it's a given. If you're going into that industry, you cannot be talking about, please, my weekends are important. It cannot happen. Any other questions or even contributions? I mean, this is a forum we're all, I believe we're all HR professionals, and we also all have something to bring to the table. So let it not just be question and answer. If anybody has something they want to shed more light on, maybe tell us a story which we can learn from, we're all welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Bukola.
All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for this wonderful session. God bless you, man.
You're not very clear. You're not very clear.
Okay, what about now?
Okay,
Can you hear
yes,
me?
yes.
All right. So thank you very much for this insightful session with you. God bless you. All right. So my question is talking about compliance. What is view compliance to me? It's like two-sided. Just like you emphasize the employee and then
Oh,
individual
sorry,
compliance.
Bukola, I cannot hear you. You're fading in and fading out. And unfortunately, we're trying around. If you can quickly type it in the chat box so I can respond, that would be fine. No, but we're coming to a close. You know, today is Sunday. Everybody needs to get ready
Okay,
for work
okay.
tomorrow. So let me see any other. Okay, I was hoping that Buki would be able to type in, or sorry, Bukola would be able to. Okay, she has left. She has left. So I just want to thank all of you that came in for today's session. Like I said, once more, this is HR mentorship. It's a forum which has been created to mentor us. You know, knowledge is never too much or too little. I'm very sure some of you also would have a lot to share and a lot to give if you are opportune to also facilitate such sessions. So I want to thank everybody once more for coming in. And at this occasion, on behalf of I don't know if it's on behalf of our coordinator and the head of the HR mentorship program, Dr. Yemi Adeosun, I'd like to wish everybody good night. Have a productive week. Thank you for coming in. Till we see again on another HR mentorship program. Thank you very much. Please feel free to log out.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you
you
for
so much,
having us,
ma'am. Have a
ma'am.
good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
man.
Thank
madam.
you very much
Thank you.
for the
Thank you so
presentation.
much.
Thank you very
I
much.
appreciate your
God
session.
bless you.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much, ma'am.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Good night.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good
Okay, good
night.
night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, ma'am.
Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Adeosun. I appreciate you for this time. I hope I will
Good
see
night,
you at
man.
the Badr HR
Bye bye,
Hangout.
man. Good night, man.
Good night.
Yeah,
Good night.
so
Good
I
night.
plan to come for the
Bye bye,
background
man.
out in
Bye.
afternoon.
We love you,
Yeah,
man.
I've been looking forward to see you. Hope to see you that day. Thank you.
Yeah,
Good
welcome.
night.
All right.
Oh, okay. Good night. Good night, dear. Good night.